All right, so welcome to Healing from Divorce. This is part three. And if y'all understood what I did to get here to talk to y'all tonight, I literally moved my daughter in today. So the first of three college drop offs. So just completed that. And yeah, so my ex husband and I were with her, getting her settled. Ended up taking all day long. And so I was blazing back down the road to get here because I didn't want to miss this live. Not that I couldn't reschedule it, but I like to keep my word. And I also, I'm always excited to talk to you guys. So today we are talking about closure. What if there's no closure and you are going through a divorce? And so I'm going to try to hold my phone steady here because I'm just trying to experiment with it and see if the feedback I was getting in my last live was because of my phone stand that I usually use when I go live. And so I'm just going to talk to you. Um, so, what to do if there's no closure and you're going through a divorce? And when you think about the fact that you're going through a divorce, in your head, or someone else may even say to you, well, isn't that closure enough? But for a lot of us, that's not enough to be considered closure because sometimes we don't even know how we arrived at divorce. We don't even truly understand what made the other person give up or what's making us feel like we're feeling right now. It's a lot of different things. And so it doesn't mean that you will automatically have closure just because you're in the beginning stages of a divorce or divorce is impending. And so I think it's good to talk about it because ultimately, no matter how this thing turns out, you want to be able to walk away healed. You want to come out of this okay. And so I'm just going to give you just some quick tips and a way to look at it that might help you. So when you're seeking closure, I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what does closure look like for me? So, because closure isn't the same for everybody. And so for some people, that closure could look like, I would like an apology. It can look like I want another conversation with my spouse. I want to understand where they're coming from. So I would like them to explain some things. And like even in the case of where it could be like infidelity or something like that, and you may know that they were unfaithful, but you may not understand all the reasons why. And so for some people, they want to, they want to hear that. They want to talk to the spouse. For some, they want the assurance that there's going to be some kind of relationship going forward. Hi to everybody joining. Thank you for joining me tonight. Um, and if you're just coming in, we're talking about healing from divorce. This is part three in the series that I'm doing, and what to do if there's no closure. And so I encourage you to think about what closure looks like for you because it's not the same for every person. And like I said, it depends on your circumstances. And so as you're considering what closure looks like and you're thinking it through, and you can even write it out because it might help, then the next thing you want to identify is this closure that you have in your mind. Is it dependent on your spouse acting? Is it depending on an action that they need to take? Like, would you want them to apologize? Would you want them to communicate with you again? Would you want them to explain some things to you? So, because that's a big thing that you need to decide on, or you need to figure out. What is the closure that you're looking for? What would it look like for you? And does that closure depend on the other person? And I want you to ask yourself those questions because it's going to help you work through what you need. And so you need to be able to move forward, right? In order to do that, I think that it means taking back control because a lot of the times when we put things in the hands of other people, we might not get what we want. So it's hard to attain closure if it's up to the spouse, if it's up to the other person. Now, you could be a person that says, well, I just want to have another conversation with them, or I want to apologize, or I want to explain some things, meaning that the onus is on you. However, if your spouse isn't willing to hear you out, or they're not willing to talk about it anymore, they don't want to go to therapy, or whatever it is, then they are still a part of the closure. And so, in order to change what this looks like, you have to shift your perspective when it comes to closure. You need to shift your perspective here, because if you can't get to closure, you can't get to acceptance. And acceptance is what you need to do in order to move forward. And so closure is sort of like, it's almost like being in denial in a way, because you're kind of in limbo. And so, in order to shift the perspective, just think about it like this. If you want your spouse to apologize, or if you want them to explain, just think about how people are in general. Sometimes people don't apologize, like even when they know that they're wrong. Sometimes they just don't want to do it, because it makes them feel uncomfortable, or it makes them feel bad, and or whatever it makes them feel, or they feel like, well, then you were right, and so they're not going to give you that. You can see it as being petty or whatever, but some people just won't apologize, even when they know for a fact that they're wrong, even when they've been caught red-handed, sometimes even when they've said some things, no matter what the reason is, they aren't going to apologize. And then you have those people, that they don't have a lot of empathy. They don't really know how to be accountable. And so you can talk to them until you're blue in the face. You can have your last conversation with them. You can communicate with them. You can do all the things, and they are not going to see it your way. You're not going to be able to convince them that they did anything wrong. You're not going to be able to convince them that you two can work the thing out, that you can have your marriage again, that you can go, through what it takes and come out stronger. You just aren't going to be able to convince them in some cases. And then sometimes you have people that just do it for meanness, like they know, and they are trying to hurt you. And so, um, that's something that you just have to consider, is that you might not get that apology, you might not get the closure that you're seeking for them, for various reasons. And so that's one way you have to shift the perspective, to understand that they won't give it to you in some cases. And so the second way of shifting the perspective is you take control of the closure that you're seeking. You make it something that is that you're able to give yourself. And so what I mean is, you have to look at some things, and one of those things is their actions. And so, since you can't get them to apologize, since you may not get them to act or do whatever it is that you want them to do, then what you need to do is look at, well, what can I do for myself? How can I move forward when I have control of what closure looks like for me? And so I suggest that you look at the actions, because a lot of times the words we want to hear and the things we want to hear might make us feel better, but really it's the actions that speak louder. And so if you look at the fact that the person may have asked you for a divorce, they may have even gone ahead and served you or filed, or maybe they asked for a divorce, but they're not doing anything, they're not acting on it. However, they also aren't communicating well. They aren't initiating communication. They're not trying to work it out. So these types of actions suggest that divorce may be what they really want. And so if you look at the actions of a person rather than what you expect from them, if you look at that, then it can help you to provide your own closure, because the actions are speaking. The actions are showing you, this is what it is. This is not what I think, but this is really what's happening. And so it's one of the ways that you can provide the closure for yourself, is you let the action speak to you and allow you to make your own decision about what's going on. And so that's one way. The other way is to look at the person as they are right now. So I'm saying, look at their behavior. So not just the actions that they're doing that say they want a divorce, but how have they been treating you? If they're not communicating, do you think that they're going to communicate going forward? If they haven't been, don't look at them like how they were when you married them, or who you want them to be, or what their potential is to be, or knowing that they're a good person deep down. Look at how they're truly acting right now and ask yourself, with these current characteristics, is this someone that I would choose to be with? Is this someone that I would trust my future to? Is this someone that I want to continue, being in a marriage with? And so I'm not trying to get you to move toward divorce, but I'm trying to get you to look at closure in a different way so that you're using your own actions and your own mind rather than someone else and rather than waiting around for something to happen. And so as you're doing that, it's going to be painful, but it's really you taking control of your life right now. And that's what has to happen, because as the rug has just been pulled out from under you and your spouse has said they want a divorce, or you're not ready, or whatever is going on, then this is the perfect time to begin to think of yourself and to take control of your life. And so as you're doing that and as you're considering what you want, yes, there is some risk involved in creating your own closure. There's some good things to it, some advantages to it, but you might say, well, what if I go ahead and I seek closure on my own, and I say, okay, they asked for the divorce, they're not showing me otherwise. Obviously, this is what they want. I need to begin to prepare myself, for the end. What if I do that and then my spouse later says they changed their mind? Like months can go by, and sometimes people are separated and they do reconcile. And I hope that that can happen for everybody in some way. If you're able to do it in a safe way and it works for both people, I really do hope that that happens. But in the event that you seek closure for yourself, you will then need to decide, if your spouse comes back and says, okay, I changed my mind, I don't want the divorce. You need to decide if the way you're feeling now is better than when you know you weren't communicating and when you didn't have closure. If now that you've begun to heal and now that you've accepted things, are you doing better or feeling better? Then that means it's something to think about. You have to weigh out, is it worth going around the bend with them again when you know they might change their mind, or when you know that they have a tendency to start doing the same behaviors again, to mistreat you again. So these are all things that you need to consider. It is your marriage. It is an extremely important part of your life. And it is very painful if it doesn't go well. And so I know statistics say that divorce is really high on the list of things that cause people, emotional um, issues. Like it's just hard to manage. It's second under grief, like of losing someone. And so divorce can feel like that. It's just that the person is still alive. And so tread very lightly, and carefully when you're making these decisions. But understand that the ability to provide closure to yourself is important, because otherwise you remain in limbo. And then you have to ask yourself, well, if I'm going to just wait for them, how long am I willing to wait? If you've been married a year or two, or maybe even 10 years, 20 years, and you've been waiting on things to get better or waiting for things to work out, then you have to ask yourself, do you have more time to wait for them to come around, to begin initiating conversations, to begin communicating, to begin treating you better? Do you have time for them to explain to you what happened or how they got to this point? How long are you going to wait? And that's totally up to you. There is no time limit that anybody can give you, because it's up to you and what you feel. It is your marriage. And so you have to be willing to put that on the table and say, am I willing to basically put my life on hold and give them the time that they need, or that they ask for, that I want them to have, to make sure this divorce is totally the right decision. And so you have to decide that. But then on the flip side of that is, how much living could you be doing if you accept things, if you create your own closure and you accept things for how they are, and you begin to move forward with the actions that you've seen. You take your own actions of putting yourself back together, of seeking therapy, of starting to heal, of thinking about, what do I really want and what do I deserve? Do I deserve better treatment than this? Surely, and I said this in a post, surely this isn't the best that God can do. Just because you're with somebody doesn't always mean that that's where you need to be. And so I'm not, like I said, an advocate for divorce. But while we're talking about it, while we're thinking about it, we might as well be truthful. And you should evaluate what it takes for you to be happy, what that looks like for you, or just being content. You should evaluate that. Don't be afraid to think about what you really want, because this is a great time to do it. Your spouse has already told you what they're thinking and what they want if they're talking about divorce. And so this is a great time for you to sit there and think, is this the end all be all? Could there be something better? Is this the way I want to live? Is this what I want to do? Is this who I want to be with? And it's nothing wrong with evaluating that, because, it's not like you're doing anything wrong because it was brought to your attention first. Okay? And so that's basically all I have on closure, and how to move forward. Every single part of healing, every part of the healing journey takes time, takes care, takes effort. You have to manage it well, diligently. I would encourage you to take your time, and like I said, seek therapy, get support. Make sure you have a tight circle that can handle the things that you're going to share with them if you want to share. And you do not have to share with everybody. You do not need to feel obligated to share with everybody, because sometimes just the retelling can be really hard. And so handle every aspect of your healing with care. Take your time. And I do believe that you can get to closure. And I want you to get to closure because it is a big part of acceptance. And acceptance of the situation of this divorce is the first step to healing. And as I do this series, I'll break down the steps in more detail. I talked about them in the very first time I went live. And I said that acceptance is the first part of healing. The second part is grief, grieving the loss. The third part is forgiveness for yourself and for the other person if you can afford to give it. And then the final part is renewal. And so if you want to get to acceptance and begin healing, closure might be needed for you. Some people don't need it, but some people do. And so if you need it, the steps that I would take are to think about what closure means to you, understand if that closure is dependent on the other person, and then if you are able to shift that responsibility onto yourself and you provide your own closure by looking at their actions and their behavior and thinking about what you want for yourself and what you deserve. All right. Well, I don't see any questions here. And so it is always a pleasure to come and talk with y'all and to hang out with y'all. And so if you need me, you can DM me, you can email me, and I will hit you back as soon as I have an opportunity. Otherwise, guys, have a great Thursday night, and I'll see you next week.